Hello, everyone. Welcome to Promethean Action's live question and answer show. We do this show every Thursday. Thank you for tuning in today. As we're getting warmed up, why don't you let us know where you're watching from so we can get a sense of where in the world we're reaching this week. Hello, Chicky Rogue. Hello, Ura. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Okay, so as you can see, Susan Kokinde unfortunately will not be joining us today. She had some obligations she had to take care of. So instead, we're going to be joined with Promethean Action's Bruce Director. Some of you may know him. He does our Saturday shows quite frequently. And maybe some of you even remember the Riemann for Anti-Dummies series. That almost feels like another lifetime ago, but I'd like to welcome Bruce Director to fill in for Susan Kokinde today. Bruce, can you give everyone a quick background, your history, what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. It's good to join you. I enjoy watching these shows with the Liberty Ladies, and I'm happy to substitute for Susan for today. I worked with Lyndon LaRouche for basically half a decade, which is most of my adult life. Before that, I was in heavy construction and classical music, strange combination. Then I got into politics, and I worked with LaRouche political organizing in the 70s in Washington, D.C., in the 80s in Texas and Louisiana, Oklahoma area. Ran for Congress several times. And then in the early 1990s, after the legal attacks on LaRouche and he went to prison, I joined Barbara in the legal department, trying to undo the illegalities and the corruption that was directed at LaRouche. Today, of course, people are quite familiar with the fact that the oligarchy will use the legal system to suppress their political opponents, like they did to Trump, and as we're seeing now with the revelations that have come out about Arctic Frost, to basically anybody who supported him or his top supporters. But the forerunner of that was the prosecutions against LaRouche. So Barbara and I were involved in trying to undo those, and we could talk about that if people have questions, but it's an important element of our nation's history. And also during that time period and most of my life, I spent a lot of time with LaRouche working on some of his projects around science and music and art, and basically trying to investigate both the history of science and also the applications of that important developments in science towards creating a new philosophical approach that goes against the goes against the conventional way of thinking. And I think today that's quite relevant. If we have any questions, people can ask them.
Thank you, Bruce. So I see people are now tuning in. I'd like to give just a quick shout out to Chicky Rogue. Thank you for tuning in every week. Great to have you here. We have some people reaching out from X.com. We love our X.com viewers. Thank you, Amanda from Melbourne. We have a bunch of questions today from Australia. Also from Canada. We have tons of questions from Canada. Thank you, Victor from X.com. We also have Renee. Welcome from California. Great to have you back. How about Milwaukee, Wisconsin? Thank you very much. And thank you, Chicky. All right, so thank you. So today we're going to start off actually by reviewing what happened last night. I went and pulled a few videos from the White House YouTube channel, and I just wanted to make sure this is going to set the tone for today's show. I just wanted to kind of make sure people understood what happened directly from the president's YouTube. So this is not coming from a major news network. This is coming from the president's operation. So this was last night, Trump arriving, just doing the
Hello, Mr. President.
First diplomatic formalities.
Mr. President.
the President of the People's Republic of China.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
很高兴再次见到你。
Me too.
And we're going to have a very successful meeting, I have no doubt.
我肯定我们今天会有非常成功的会议。
But he's a very tough negotiator. That's not good.
但是他是很强烈的谈判者哦，这不好。
We know each other well.
我们相互之间非常了解。
Mr. President, do you plan to sign a trade deal today?
Could be.
有可能，
I think we'll have a great understanding.
但是我们会达成很好的
We
理
have a
解。
great relationship. We've always had a great relationship.
Will they start buying U.S. soybeans again?
我们之间的关系怎么样？
他问他是不是还在为美国的大。
All right, so then I want
Well, thank you very
then I wanna
much. It's
go-
a great honor to be with a friend of mine, really for a long time now, if you think about it. The very, very distinguished and respected President of China. And we will be having some discussions. I think we've already agreed to a lot of things, and we'll agree to some more right now. But President Xi is a great leader of a great country, and I think we're going to have a fantastic relationship for a long period of time. And it's an honor to have you with us. Thank you very much. Thank you.
President Trump, it is a great pleasure for me as well to meet you. And it feels very warm seeing you again because it's been many years. Since your re-election, we have spoken on the phone 3 times, exchanged several letters, and stayed in close contact. And our joint guidance, China's relations have remained stable on the whole. Given our different national conditions, we do not always see eye to eye with each other. And it is normal for the 2 leading economies of the world to have frictions now and then. And in the face of winds, waves, and challenges, you and I, at the helm of China-US relations, should stay the right course and ensure the steady sailing forward of the giant ship of China-US relations. I always believe that China's development goes hand in hand with your vision to make America great again. Our 2 countries are fully able to help each other succeed and prosper together. Over the years, I have stated in public many times that China and the United States should be partners and friends. This is what history has taught us and what reality demands. A few days ago, in the latest round of consultation, our 2 economic and trade teams reached basic consensus on addressing our respective major concerns and made encouraging progress. This provided the necessary conditions for our meeting today. Mr. President, I am ready to continue working with you to build a solid foundation for China-US relations and create a sound atmosphere for the development of both countries. Mr. President, you care a lot about world peace, and you are very enthusiastic about settling various regional hotspot issues. I appreciate your great contribution to the recent conclusion of the Gaza ceasefire agreement. During your visit to Malaysia, you witnessed the signing of the Joint Declaration on Peace along the Cambodia-Thailand border, to which you had provided input. China has been helping in our own way Cambodia and Thailand properly settle their border disputes, and we have also been promoting peace talks to resolve other hotspot issues. The world today is confronted with many tough problems. China and the U.S. can jointly shoulder our responsibility as major countries and work together to accomplish more great and concrete things for the good of our 2 countries and the whole world. I look forward to exchanging views with you on questions important for our 2 countries and the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to have you all. Thank you very much.
All right, and finally, I just wanted to play the Trump is leaving back to the United States. As you can see, he left in full. Thank you, Bill. Bill says the royals should be very afraid of this meeting, Christ the King. Thank you, Bill, for the super chat. Yes, we do agree the royals should be very afraid of this meeting. So I'm gonna open this up for comment to Barbara and Bruce. What are your thoughts about what happened last night? We had some agreement on things like fentanyl. There was an agreement. I believe we can pull the thing. The United States and China reached a deal where they're gonna begin to buy our soybeans. There was more discussions about semiconductors and the latest AI processors. But I'd like to have Bruce and Barbara say what they're thinking about this.
Why don't you start, Barbara?
Well, I think it's a tremendous breakthrough. You have a situation in the world where you go back to what was defined by Lyndon LaRouche as the four powers who could actually overthrow the British Empire. And the way the Brits work is to put those potential powers into conflict with one another. And what's happening here is that you see discussions about economics with Russia, not just the war in Ukraine. You see these mammoth discussions with China, the two largest economies in the world, which if they came together and actually united around a vision of the future and, basically return the sovereignty of the United States at this point away from this globalist nonsense we had under Biden, then you've got the power to actually overturn the British Empire and to launch a new renaissance for humanity. All of the issues, you can tick them off, be soybeans for farmers, be they chips for powering everything we need in terms of the computer revolution, so-called. And in addition, actually discussions about Ukraine, all of this occurred, and also rare earths, which now everything is put off for a year as to any kind of major, gaps in that from China. So it's quite a breakthrough. And you see the stupidity of the press this morning. The only thing they've got their pants on fire about is the statement Trump made about possibly restarting nuclear testing. They didn't cover any of the other things, and they even lied about what was said about that. Because what he's saying, if other countries are doing that, we're going to do it too. And obviously, in the way Trump negotiates, he's looking for complete denuclearization of the world. So they didn't cover that. They just covered that somehow he was going to cause a nuclear war. And that's how they interpreted what came out of this. So the difference between us and them couldn't be clearer.
Somebody in the chat says that Carney is to meet with Xi Jinping today. Does anyone know if that's true? That would certainly fit the profile.
Could be. He's chasing Trump. That's all he's doing. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen. The world's central bankers having to tail after Trump and try and set up separate deals and dish him, and it's not working with anybody.
I would add this, that, this was a really tremendous meeting. We're going to find out a lot more about it as things come out. But this, of course, comes at the end of a whole week of tremendous meetings that Trump had throughout Asia, some of which has been made public, and a lot of the implications will still come out. But I think the fundamental point here for people to keep in mind is that Trump is succeeding in rebalancing global politics here and the global economy. And what he's done in the first 10 months of his administration is quite tremendous. We can go over the details, but it is a complete reversal of the last 20, 30 years of globalism, environmentalism, zero growth, and so forth. And I think it's taking a little while for people to get psychologically used to the fact that the world is changing, and it's changing because of what Trump is doing in the United States and how he's projecting that around the world. So this is a question where one has to set aside the previous axiomatic assumptions you had about how the world works and really get your mind around the fact that there is a dramatic change going on here, which is nothing anybody has seen in any of our lifetimes. And so when you're trying to keep track and understand what's going on, don't get distracted or off base by a lot of the superficial analysis which is out there, not only in the mainstream media, but also in the so-called alternative media that we see on the internet.
Yeah, our audience is already noting. Yeah, Obama followed Trump around the world too. That's very true. So I went and pulled the section on nuclear power testing, and so after Trump left Korea, after he left the Xi meeting, there was a press gaggle on the plane. So let me just, excuse me. I have to remove that. Okay, there we go.
Write your Truth Social about nuclear testing. What about resuming nuclear testing? What prompted you to do that right before the meeting?
It had to do with others. They seem to all be nuclear testing.
Russia?
We have more nuclear weapons than anybody. We don't do testing. You know, we've halted it many years ago. But with others doing testing, I think it's appropriate that we do also.
Any details around the testing, sir? Like where, when?
It'll be announced. You know, we have test sites. It'll be announced.
Did Israel give you a heads up before they bombed Gaza? And is it still a ceasefire if they're stopping?
It is. No, they had a sniper, and one of their soldiers were killed, and they did retribution. So we'll see. But yeah, it is a ceasefire. It's back to ceasefire.
But is that
So we have Trump also commenting on the United States potentially restarting nuclear testing, seeing as other countries have begun to do the same. Quick shout out here to PNW Woods. Thank you. Thank you for your support. We really appreciate the super chat. We depend on all of our viewers' donations. We depend on very much. We don't do corporate reads. The only thing we have, and I did turn down the amount of advertising today. So you guys should not be seeing as many YouTube ads. I'm really sorry about that. I only recently found out just how many ads they were playing on our live streams. So I want to actually switch questions. This is from Big Clouds. Maybe you guys will know a little bit of the backstory on this Governor Dick Lamb. Why is nobody with a major platform or legacy media talking about this plan to destroy America by former Democratic Governor Dick Lamb? I have not been following Dick Lamb. Do you guys know anything about this?
I didn't know he was still active.
He's dead. In other words, he died in 2021, I think, if I remember correctly. He was a very ugly person, that's true. And there may be some legacy thing after him. You know, he was a Malthusian population control, no growth idiot par excellence. But that's basically what I know about him.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, and I have another super chat here. This one's from Australia, but you guys both watch Bannon, so maybe you guys have a comment on this. I would like to understand why you seem to dislike Bannon. You basically agree on almost everything, and you praised Peter Navarro, who's actually hosted Bannon's show several times. Thanks. Thank you, Norbert, for your super chat. I open the floor to Barbara and Susan.
Well, I don't dislike Bannon. I think he lacks a certain understanding of economics, which is where we always get into difficulties. Peter Navarro understands much better what Trump's actual American system economics are. And, you know, he is completely sort of at war with the Chinese Communist Party, which a lot of Americans are at war with and probably should be to a certain extent because we've got to defend our country. But I think he takes it to an extreme. So that's a kind of disagreement. You know, he wants to actually create, as far as I know, kind of a Christian nationalist framework. I'm more for a nationalist framework, which actually introduces God back into our political debates, but doesn't institutionalize it quite in the way that he's doing it. So if people didn't see the very moving turning point action event last night in Mississippi, find it for yourselves on YouTube. And you'll see there between Erica Kirk and J.D. Vance a great deal of coherence with what we here at Promethean Action are trying to do, particularly the emphasis which Erica Kirk had on young people and telling, you know, the next generation there of young people that you are the future and you have to begin to embrace the meaning of that. It's very, very moving. And it's basically, it articulated for me a missing element in how Bannon actually goes about things. But I don't hate him. He does very useful things, but it's not, he's got great confusion around economics. So I'll just leave it at that.
Bruce, I know you also watch Steve Bannon. What are your thoughts on Steve Bannon?
Oh, I think he plays a very useful role in many respects. He does go out and he has tried to explore the American system, but I think he misunderstands some things, as Barbara said, around economics. They're more, you know, philosophical disagreements, theoretical disagreements. Otherwise, I think he plays a very useful role, especially hosting a lot of very important people. This morning he had John Solomon on, who was doing a very interesting job breaking a lot of news around the Arctic frost and the Russiagate investigations. He tends to be a little bit too emotional and hot-headed sometimes, where he jumps to conclusions that turn out not to be correct. But that's what you would expect in a big back and forth, rough and tumble political debate. So I don't dislike him. I think that's not a characterization. Perhaps we have strong political arguments from time to time, but it's not personal. In fact, I don't know him personally. Never had a personal discussion with him. So I'm just responding to his public demeanor.
Thank you, Bruce. Super chat from Ura, who's a frequent viewer. Thank you very much for tuning in. The British government are snakes. The British government are snakes. Feels like Paul Ryan in my hood right now. Has Paul Ryan been talking about this?
Maybe he means Paul Revere.
Maybe Paul Revere. Right. Paul Revere. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so just a quick review. This is Promethean Action's live question and answer show. Please give ahead and give us a like. Smash the like button. It helps us reach more people on YouTube. And if you're interested in staying in contact with us, we do 3 political updates a week. We do a pre-recorded update on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And we do 1 live question and answer show every Thursday. So please give us a like and hit subscribe. We want you to see our next political update. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start taking the questions from our newsletter subscriber. Thank you, Anthony. I'm going to be taking some questions from our newsletter subscribers, and we're going to be starting with current events, what's going on in Ukraine, and also what's going on in China. And we thank you, Anthony. We have plenty of questions that are going to come in from Australia and Canada. All right, so let's start with the first question here. Lavrov publicly briefing that Trump backed off on peace deal that Trump proposed with Russia on Ukraine and Alaska. Kirill Dmitriev reported to have come away from his trip to the U.S. with understanding that Trump is fully captured by the neocons. U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matt Whitaker seems to be leading neocon rhetoric for aggression against Russia. Facts on the ground in Donbass appear to indicate collapse of Ukrainian defense. What's your take on Trump's apparent U-turn and alleged Russian disgust with being lured to Anchorage without tangible outcomes? And thank you, Kamara, for your question. So I open it up to Bruce and Barbara.
Well, I'll start. I think the questioner is listening a little bit too much to the internet. I've read a lot of the things that were in the basic back and forth as to what happened in Alaska versus Trump's current position. And as far as I know, the talks are still going on. And next week, I think you're going to see something very interesting happen when Hungarian Prime Minister Orban comes to meet with Trump, because he's carrying with him an alternative view of the real enemy of peace here, which is the European Union, which is the British, and which is even, everything and anything to do with NATO itself, all of which want to screw up the peace negotiations. So you've got a very, very interesting dynamic going on. And Trump is frustrated because he wants immediate results. He has one thing in mind: I want the killing to stop. On the other hand, the two combatants, are basically competing for frontline positions at this point. And in many respects, the issue in the negotiations around the Donbass may very well be solved in the next few days, as the questioner Kamara indicates, because Putin has got approximately 10,500 troops surrounded in two locations, and he's inviting the press in to actually view the situation and report on it accurately, not in the propaganda, side of war. So I expect pretty dramatic things to begin happening again next week. You've got to understand that Trump has a Senate which is full of people who are tied to the military-industrial complex. He's got a House which is the same. The actual people who are really, really, really on board with the president from the standpoint of this issue are few and far between. If you look up and take a look at the Ukrainian caucus in both the House and the Senate, you're going to be shocked at the number of people who actually support the ongoing war in Ukraine in the Congress. So this is not a issue which is not full of complexities, but I don't think that Kirill Dmitriev came away thinking that Trump is fully captured by the neocons. That's not anything I've seen or read from him. And his trip here was designed to actually introduce some reality into the conversation again versus Washington's nonsense. I put Whitaker, he's the ambassador to NATO. That's the center of the beast at this point in terms of trying to sabotage peace.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Trump has been captured by the neocons in any way on this. I think he's, as he said on it in the way back from China, he said that he discussed this a lot with Xi Jinping, and they're both going to work together to try and bring peace in Ukraine. But he said there's a lot of, I can't remember the exact phrasing he used, bad blood or difficulty. And sometimes you have to let people fight it out for a while, which I think is an expression of his frustration, because he sees the solution that he put forward in Alaska, which he's agreed to, which is, Ukraine doesn't come into NATO. There are security guarantees for both Ukraine and Russia, which both Russia has agreed to. and that Ukraine has to give up the territory. There's some quibbling over what territory that means, but that's all part of a negotiation. And yet, as he said before, when you try and get one side to agree to something, the other side doesn't. And as Barbara mentioned, the real complicating factor here is the Brits and the Europeans, who, especially the Brits, I shouldn't say that all the Europeans, but the Brits, who, and the French, and the EU bureaucracy, which every time Trump gets close to a deal, promises Zelensky more backing for more war. And that's probably what Whitaker is also reacting to. But, you know, not only is Orban coming here, but there's a block that he's created between the Prime Minister Fico of Slovakia and the new Prime Minister of the Czech Republic to actually push for peace and to break with the EU. So Trump keeps saying we're very close to a deal. Kirill Dmitriev says we've made very close progress to a deal. And Trump's just going to have to use the force of his personality and power to force this thing through. And I have no doubt that he's committed to that, and he's in no way captured by the neocons who want perpetual war with Russia.
Thank you, Barbara and Bruce. I want to give a quick shout out here to Melody Hart. Thank you very much, Melody, for tuning in every Thursday and joining us. Thank you for helping me regulate the chat. And thank you for supporting us every week. We really appreciate it.
Let me just point out, somebody in the chat just said, New Life says, I believe the EU will crumble once the Russia-Ukraine war ends. Italy will go first and then Germany. I can't read the rest of it, but I think that's an accurate assessment. And that's what we're hanging on to here, that there's a new rebalancing going on, and the real powers in Europe right now are Europe and Asia, is the United States, Russia, China, India, and countries who want to work with us on that, and not this decrepit EU British Empire thing. And that's what's the resistance is to the peace.
Thank you, Bruce. And we're going to take another regular viewer here, BW. In your opinion, is the food stamps issue helping or hurting Trump in the midterms? 99% of right wings seem to be happy, but one I respect says this may cause attrition. I hope he doesn't take the Schumer offer. Well, Schumer's offer isn't much of an offer, really. So I open it up to Barbara and Bruce. Your thoughts on food stamps, the government shutdown, and whether or not this is really helping Trump?
I don't think, you can game it out, and you're going to see things which are pretty drastic in the next, week or two, as if they don't do something about this. But the read that I got from taking a look at this yesterday is I think the Democrats are going to cave in short order because the chaos is going to, become very, very clear to everyone. There's lots of governors who are taking action, like Governor Youngkin here in Virginia, who basically did a release of emergency state funds to overcome the lack of federal funds for SNAP, which is what the food stamps are. But, not paying the cops, not paying the military, not paying the essential people, it creates a situation of chaos. And I think everybody knows that the Democrats are essentially responsible for that.
Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, BW, for joining us every week. We really appreciate the support. Okay, I'm going to take the next question here from our newsletter supporters. And just a quick shout out to the newsletter. If you want to get our free email newsletter, we send out daily updates. We send you an email daily. The link is in the description, or you can simply search the web for Promethean Action. You'll come to our website and you can get our email newsletter. Okay, this next question here is from Claude. Greetings from Texas. Thank you for all you at Promethean Action do and for taking my question. As we watch Trump and his team make deals around the world, how confidently can we be that other nations are on board We're turning away from the global elite and the bankers, central banking, and instead are united with Trump in his quest to dismantle the globalist New World Order. And what role, if any, will China, Russia, and other BRICS nations play in this effort? So thank you very much, Claude, for your question. Barbara and Bruce?
Bruce, you want to take that? I need a sip of water.
Okay. Well, I think that, other nations are having to rethink their policies right now. And to the extent that they're willing to get on board with the change that Trump has initiated and carrying out, they're going to want to cooperate. And to the extent that they try and hang on to the old policies, there's going to be a lot of political turmoil. I point particularly to, the political turmoil in Western Europe, in Britain, France, Germany, for example, where, the established parties which are in power are really minorities now. In Germany, the AfD is growing strong. In Britain, Keir Starmer is the most unpopular prime minister in British history. Macron is hanging by a thread. So the people are revolting in these countries that want to hang on to globalism, and places where they're not, the countries and the people and the leadership are quite eager to work with Trump and the United States to re-establish a relationship that's based on mutual respect and economic development. The advantage we have over the globalists right now is the globalists have nothing to offer. They had a control over the world economy through control of finance, but now that's collapsed. So for all their talk about, the need to maintain rules-based order and all this other stuff, why would anybody go along with it? It's just produced nothing but disaster for people. So I'm quite confident that this is moving in the right direction and will continue to move in the right direction.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, next question. What is the current status of the U.S.-China Phase 2 trade negotiations following the recent adjustments announced this week? Then explain key sticking points in Phase 2 along with the impact on U.S.-EU trade relations. Thank you, Mike. You probably sent this before what happened last night. So we got a little bit of clarification on Phase 2. First off, we had Trump, who commented that on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 would be, he had, I almost want to pull the quote from the thing, but Trump said that he thought that out of a level scale of 1 to 10, that his meeting with President Xi was actually a 12. So Trump walked away with this, clearly thinking that even if all the details aren't signed yet, that there is a productive path forward. I think our clips this morning kind of highlighted that. But I'd like maybe Bruce and Barbara to speak a little bit more about what they thought coming out of the meeting last night with China and with President Trump.
Well, I think that what you saw was a situation in which we've agreed on a number of things which are very, very important in terms of boosting the world economy at this point. And what I heard the president say, and what seems to be the stance, is that all of these things will be revisited in a year. So it looks to me like what you see is what you got here, which is, basically you have an agreement on soybeans for the farmers. You have an agreement on rare earths and other things in terms of advanced technologies. You have an agreement on trying to bring about peace in Ukraine between Russia and the United States. And you have, a kind of hidden agenda item, which has kind of erupted at this point in the context of these talks in Asia, which is we're going to have a nuclear power renaissance in the world at this point, largely through the fact that China is building a huge amount of power, nuclear power, at this point, and all of the agreements with the other people in Asia, like Japan, Korea, etc., have this little nuclear power component written into them. And coming back on the plane, Bruce was telling me this morning there was a lot of talk again about nuclear power being the key here in terms of solving energy, problems. And that is a huge revolution. If you think about the fact that we almost killed nuclear power as an energy source for the last, 30 years or so, ever since 3 Mile Island and that entire hoax. So I thought that was more or less the outcome of this thing at this point, and that it's a big boon to the world because it essentially rebalances and stabilizes a lot of physical economic issues.
Yeah, the issue, the point is that, U.S.-China economic relations before Trump has all been based on, as everybody knows, this crazy idea that China will be the producer, the U.S. will be the consumer, and that didn't work out. It hasn't worked out for China, which has a completely unbalanced economy that's completely dependent on industrial exports, which they're finding doesn't work. And it doesn't work for us because we have a hollowed out economy, which, has the weak supply chains and vulnerabilities in our economy. So Trump has already taken the steps to change that in the United States. That's occurring. It's going to take some time. It's only been 10 months, but it's happening much faster than people would expect. And all these trade deals that Trump is doing and investments, and with the tax bill on zero depreciation and all this, and regulations, you're getting a lot of investment in manufacturing and production. The U.S. is moving to build its own reprocessing, rare earth processing. So there's a lot of physical production. The nuclear power issue is very important that Barbara talked about. So that's changing. And China knows it needs to change because its strategy isn't going to work. So there's a little bit of friction in how you make this transition. But it's going to be resolved on the level of the two leaders. And if you look at the clip that we played, and don't get too tied up in body language and tone of voice, I think Xi Jinping acknowledged that, that we're the two big people at the helm of the ship, of the economic ship, and we better steer this properly. And that's where this thing is going to be resolved. So you'll see, I expect a lot of friction and stuff on the lower level, both on the government to government lower level, but also in the propaganda field and political field. But the real issues is going to be resolved between the level of Trump and Xi, and the fact that they announced Trump will travel in April to China, and Xi Jinping will come to the United States soon after, indicates that the two guys getting together is actually where this is going to be resolved, not on the level that most people are addressing it.
Thank you. And let me just play, I want to play this clip for everyone just so you can get a little bit of inoculation before the media onslaught. So this is really what Trump thought about the meeting here.
I think that, it's pretty much, I think we've discussed mostly what we said, pretty comprehensive. We're going to issue a statement on some of the details. But overall, I guess on the scale from 0 to 10, with 10 being the best, I would say the meeting was a 12. Okay, I think it was a 12. I think, very importantly, just the whole relationship is very, very important. And I think it was really good.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to play that clip just to give you a sense of what Trump thinks about this meeting he had with Xi Jinping. All right, next question here. This is the first one's going to be from Australia, from Roland. Roland's been following our live shows now for a long time, and we'd love to have your support. So here's your question. Hello, Promethean team. I refer to Susan's comments earlier last week regarding Trump and Albanese signing a deal for rare earth minerals in Australia. And I cannot see how this deal is an attack on the monarchical banking system as suggested. I think it's more of a deal as a smokescreen to benefit the USA and the existing but weakening Australian-USA alliance. The deal to me seems to be more like a band-aid to fix things between Trump and the Alba government for the time being. Susan mentioned many present and past Australian politicians in her presentations. These are all left-wing globalists, although Albanese, our current prime minister, is now a member of the Australian Labor Party. He was a past member of the Communist Party, and he now heads up an extreme left-wing Labor Party federal government, which has done enormous harm to Australia currently. He is cozying up to the CCP, and that is worried to all thinking Australians. Okay, I think that in Australia, we have politicians on both sides of the fence enhancing themselves in global politics and policies. Can you throw some more light on all this so I can get a greater understanding of where you are coming from? Thank you, Roland, Perth, Western Australia. Thank you for tuning in. And Barbara and Bruce, what are your thoughts?
Well, I appreciate the intelligence picture which he put together here. I think that what Susan was talking about is that any time within the extended British Empire that you actually can work out a deal with the United States which benefits both parties, you've done something significant. Australia, I only sort of touched on looking at Australia in any kind of depth during COVID, where, of course, the whole situation there and in New Zealand was that of a complete police state. So I'm not going to comment sort of beyond that. I think Roland's question is going to send me back to doing some actual looking at what's actually going on in Australia. And we have contacts there also who I think will ask to answer his question and to fill out the picture he's presenting.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Australian internal politics to comment in detail. Although, it's obviously the case that Australia, it's a big island and a big continent, but it's a small country. It has some economic power, but it's completely dependent on its relationships to the two big economic powers, which is the United States and China. It has a history of being closely associated with the United States and has an American system tradition. And my thinking is that as this relationship develops, people in Australia are going to become increasingly happier to align themselves with Trump's ideas than with the left-wing ideas which tend to dominate Australian politics from time to time.
Thank you, Barbara and Bruce. If you're just tuning in, this is Promethean Action's live question and answer show. We do this show every Thursday at the same time, around 11 a.m. Eastern. Most of the questions that we're taking today are coming from our newsletter subscribers. We also have a once-a-day email list. You can get our free email newsletter. You don't even have to pay anything for it. Free email newsletter. The link is in the description, but I am also going to throw a link to here at the screen. You can go to prom.ac. You can search the web for Promethean Action, or the link is in the description. They'll get a free newsletter. You'll get updates when we go live, when we post our political briefings. We do 3 political briefings on YouTube a week. Subscribe to the channel. You'll get a notification when we go live next. And please hit the like button. Yes, that sends a positive signal to YouTube and syndicates our message to a wider audience. Okay, so I'm going to take the next question here from Melanie. Okay, hello from Australia. In the media here, Ambassador Rudd is being credited as getting this deal over the line by trawling the halls of Congress. Our Prime Minister was off on holidays last week before going to the U.S. on Monday. These two men are far left liberals and are not liked in Australia, as President Trump called Albo popular. He only got 30% of the vote and got in on preferences. I'm perplexed by this deal as their actions are for Australia and not for the British. I'm perplexed by this deal as their actions are for Australia and not for the British Empire. How do these men fit into the overall picture? Are they secretly working for the good? Thank you if you can shed any more light on this. So I think you're kind of asking, how can could these bad people be actually secretly doing something good? So Barbara and Bruce, your thoughts?
Well, I'll second. Although I thought there was an interaction in the Oval with Rudd, as I recall it.
Yes, there was.
And essentially, President Trump indicated his supreme displeasure with the guy. So if they're united, that's a very interesting dynamic, to say the least. And again, I haven't looked at the overall situation. I will, in order to actually answer your question more definitively.
Yeah, let me just introduce a really briefly a thought here to help guide how we should think about these kinds of questions, because they're very important and legitimate questions and puzzling. But Lyndon LaRouche also emphasized that you really have to think about history and current history, that is politics, from the standpoint of classical drama. And in great drama, as opposed to what you get in Hollywood movies, there really are no good guys and bad guys in the drama. Everybody is ambiguous figures, and they're responding and interacting regarding the dynamics of how the drama is unfolding. I would really recommend people look at the dramas of Schiller and Shakespeare for reference to this. And if you develop a way of thinking about that and adapting that to current politics, you will find that oftentimes throughout history, you have people who are one persuasion or who end up doing something that's completely opposite to the way they're thinking or they had been thinking because of the dynamics of history. And I think what's going on right now in the world is so dramatic and such a big break with everything that's happened in the past that even people who spent their whole lives in one track, so to speak, will find that they're drawn into policies which are the ones we're pushing and Trump is pushing.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Bruce, for your question. Next one is going to be on Russia. Why did Trump impose economic sanctions on Russia? I don't see any argument in favor of such a reckless action. The first time in many years when I have lost faith in Trump's political instincts. Thank you, Tatiana, for expressing your thoughts. Barbara and Bruce?
Well, I think that it is just a symbolic thing, to tell you the guy's honest truth. I think that basically you've got the whole Senate jumping up and down in the background and saying, Putin is never going to come to the table, yada, yada, yada. They have a huge sanctions package, which they wanted to impose on Russia, which would have knocked out all of Trump's key trade deals with China and with India if it was imposed. And I think he did it because there's nothing else he has to actually indicate his displeasure that Putin has not come to the table in a timely way. And as I stressed before, this president has one thing on his mind right now, which is stop the killing. And that really is what is governing his actions. Russia, on the other hand, and Ukraine, on the other hand, actually are still in many respects, continuing the war, although I think there has been some movement over the past week on Russia's part. And I think that the what happens in the Donbass around this latest offensive and around these 10,500 trapped Ukrainians is going to have a significant, kind of influence on events coming forward. But, he's not doing the worst nonsense, which these guys wanted him to do, he is doing something to indicate his displeasure that he can't get this thing solved right away because he wants to stop the killing. And that's his singular focus. So that's how I'd answer the question.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Thank you, Barbara. And I'd also like to thank Paul Traynor. Thank you for coming and joining us every week. Our supporter, a great supporter from the UK. And the next question we're going to be taking is from the UK. So the next question is, question from the UK. Can we be sure that it's just the British Empire causing the issues and not the usual neocon deep state in Washington trying to thwart any meaningful resolution to Ukraine between Trump and Putin? Or is it the Washington and London deep states working together? Also, I have thought for a long time that the UK's Defense Department should be renamed to the War Department, and then Trump goes and does it, when it would be nice if the US actually kept to defense. Thank you, Ian, for your question and comment. So what is the role? How do we know that it's just the British Empire and not the neocon deep state in Washington? What's the relationship between the two? Bruce and Barbara?
I don't think there's any difference between the neocons and the British Empire, to tell you the truth. There was a piece at the Financial Times which did a forum about last April or so, and the heads of intelligence for the United States under Biden and for Britain participated publicly, and they said, there's no difference between these two agencies. We're the same agency. We decide how we're going to operate based on who has the most assets in any given area in the world. And I think that was pretty much proof that there's no real room between the neocons or the warmongers here, largely in the State Department and in elements of the Pentagon, and the modern British Empire. That was their goal. Their goal was for any colony they were actually looking at penetrating, and that's in all of the roundtable pieces. The idea is you can do whatever you want to do domestically as long as it doesn't threaten the empire. But in terms of foreign policy, we run the show. And that has been the situation ever since the end of World War II.
Yeah, Lyndon LaRouche said many times that all world politics from the 1760s onward has been determined by a conflict between the United States of America, even before it became an official country, and the British Empire, because these are two diametrically opposed views of politics, society, and man. And throughout our history, the British have tried to interfere into American domestic politics to try and steer the U.S. back into alliance with the British Empire. And the United States has survived because we've been able to bring forth leadership who fought the British Empire. It's a long story, which we don't have time to go into now. We have a lot of books that Promethean Action has sponsored and supported that describe this history. But, the latest development was with Roosevelt at the end during World War II, who told the British, this is it. At the end of this war, there's not going to be any British Empire. And Roosevelt died, and the British then took over and created what today we call the deep state. But we've had presidents like Trump, like Roosevelt, like Lincoln, McKinley, who asserted U.S. Sovereignty, and the British have tried to interfere politically, domestically in the United States, and they're still doing it today. And that's the big divide between the two systems, the British and the Americans, the British imperial system and the American idea of a constitutional republic based on increasing the productive powers of labor. And so that's how we know what the divide is.
Thank you, Bruce and Barbara. The next few questions, people are just really still focused on this Russia-Ukraine peace deal. So we're going to keep talking about this issue because it's really on everyone's mind. So next question is from Carol. Since Putin is not really the one who calls the shots about Ukraine, the Russian general staff is, could the sanctions be designed to hurt enough that the Russian general staff is forced to bend? Assuming, of course, that the general staff is compromised of war hawks. This is my current theory. I have heard Putin voice concerns about signaling of any kind of peace deal with an illegitimate leader as Zelensky is. He obviously won't trust the Europeans or NATO ever again. So who inks the documents for Ukraine? Thank you, Carol. And let me just pull up this next question because I think it goes together really well here. And this one's from Nancy, I'm still confused about Russia. Putin is no saint, and I'm hearing that Trump's strategy is to let Putin keep trying to win the war, and eventually Russia will collapse. Granted, the Europeans still want war, and Boris Johnson's refusal to negotiate is why we are here, but Putin's army hasn't made much of an advance since May. Trump just imposed sanctions. We are supposedly telling Zelensky what targets to take out in Russia, and this has done a lot of damage to Putin's energy supplies. Putin is still a thug, and it's our advantage to have him gone. So thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Carol, for your questions on what's going on with Russia and Putin. So, Bruce and Barbara, your thoughts?
Well, the problem right now, as far as I see it, is just a really small one in terms of getting some type of understanding, which is the Russians are very, very wary of a ceasefire in place. And you might not be able to see why that is if you're not looking at when this war actually started, which is in 2014, around the color revolution, which we and the British ran in Ukraine against the duly elected president of Ukraine. So they out of that came these so-called Minsk agreements, which basically had this notion of a ceasefire in place as the key element of the agreement. Ukraine and the United States and the British violated that completely and began to actually launch a war against the eastern provinces of Ukraine and Crimea, all of which voted to become part of Russia as a result of the coup. So then what happens is, crazy Angela Merkel comes out after she's retired and says, well, the Minsk agreements were only a big facade, which we created to trap Russia into peace while we armed Ukraine up to the, gills to actually fight Russia. And that's why Russia is not going to agree, or is very hesitant to agree, to a ceasefire in place unless there's some kind of guarantee that actually we're not going to repeat this as being a farce where we make a peace and then Europe continues to attack us using Ukraine as their proxy. So that's the very murky problem which exists right now in these negotiations. And people are pressing on that because they know that Russia is very hesitant to actually agree to any ceasefire in place. And I really do wonder sometimes about what kind of intelligence picture has actually been presented to the president. Because it's clear to me that there's a lot of stay-behind people in the CIA who are the people putting the analysis of the situation before him. So that's, and Putin, for what everybody thinks of his portrayal in the media, is really quite a student of international law and is extremely lawyerly, in my view, in his approach to this conflict. Why hasn't Russia actually been able to conquer Ukraine to this date? Well, what Putin will tell you is, I haven't been fighting Ukraine. I've been fighting NATO throughout the war. and I'm restrained in it because I don't want to actually do acts which will make the population hate me in terms of an ultimate result. I think that's the kind of worldview he puts forward. I don't think it necessarily coheres with reality in terms of the big question of why hasn't Russia been able to actually overcome Ukraine's defenses at this point. But I think that's the kind of difficulties which are going on in this particular negotiation. Bruce may have something to add.
Well, I think that this is clearly why Viktor Orban, even before Trump got elected, when asked, what do you do to resolve the situation in Ukraine? He said, bring back Trump. You got to have somebody from outside who respects what's going on in each side. And Trump does that. He also understands that rebuilding U.S.-Russia relations is absolutely crucial, not only for the United States, but for world stability generally. That's why this issue of the Bering Strait Tunnel came up and is very significant. All kinds of economic deals that Trump wants to do with Russia. On the other hand, Russia has a well-known history, and it's totally justified that this is they can't let foreign troops and NATO troops be so close to their western border. So Russia will endure a lot of suffering if it has to, and I don't think it's endured that much right now, to defend its sovereignty. And Trump understands that. And he also understands the duplicitous game that Zelensky and the British and the Biden administration played. So the fact of the matter is that Trump understands this. He's totally correct when he says the war wouldn't have happened if I were president. So he's trying to stop a war which was caused not by his policies, but by the policies of the people who are opposed to him. And he's the only person who has the credibility on both sides. And I think Barbara is totally right. The visit by Orban next week is going to be really important. Trump keeps saying we're going to get a deal, and I really think he's going to pull it off. So all these things that are said and these questions are valid, but the issue is how do you shift it? And I think that's only hope is Trump influence, and he's demonstrated his commitment and passion to knock heads to make something happen.
Thank you very much, Bruce and Barbara. Okay, we got a super chat. I'm going to take it. You guys can answer it however you want, but this is a question that comes up obviously frequently from our audience. So I'm going to take it and you guys can answer it however you want. First off, thank you, Texas Grown, for your support. We can't do these shows without the support of our readers and viewers. So thank you very much for the super chat. Miss Helga Zepp-LaRouche was on Kim Iverson's channel a few days ago talking about Russian-American unity. Let's get her done. Any comments on this before we move on?
Not really. We obviously disagree with Miss Helga Zepp-LaRouche, and we've had those disagreements primarily evolve around the role of Donald Trump and the role of the United States in the world. But above and beyond that, that's the only thing I'd say in answer to the question.
Yeah, I didn't see the appearance, so I really can't comment on it.
Thank you. So yeah, I find it a little bit interesting that she cares about American-Russian unity. Okay. So next question is going to be from our newsletter. We're going to have one on the UN, and then we're going to have one on, we're going to have a question on Mark Carney in Canada now after this one. The UN is useless. So first, thank you, Martin, for your question. Yes, the UN is absolutely useless. I believe the best chance to achieve permanent peace is for the formation of an alliance between the US, Russia, China, and India. Such an alliance could mandate an end to the war and would benefit all countries in the alliance and the world. China is in flux and is questionable. What are the chances of such an alliance? Thank you, Martin, for your question.
Well, basically what you're talking about here is the four powers in the world which have the economic and population potential to bring about a new human renaissance if they choose to do so. These four powers at the same time are recognized by the British Empire for exactly that potential. The House of Lords did a report in 2018 which targeted all four powers as being exactly that, the four powers in the world who are most important to the British Empire. Why are they important? Because they recognize exactly what I just said. If those four powers were to join and to create an economic development agenda for the world and end the predatory financial system which the British Empire runs, you've got a huge potential to actually change the world for what it was intended to be. So that's my answer to your question. And I think that this is the battlefront on which all of these wars that we see are really being fought.
In the CBS interview with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff in the wake of the treaty and the settlement in the Middle East, Kushner said that Trump asked him during these negotiations, what are the chances of success? And Kushner said 100% because failure is not an option. And I think that applies to here. The chances of this four-power agreement are 100% because without it, the human race descends into chaos. And I think we have a unique combination of capability right now. Look at the leaders of these four countries: Trump, Putin, Xi, and Modi. These are real national leaders who have an interest in mankind. And I think we have the combination to pull it together. And the most important thing is for us to mobilize the American people behind it, because that gives Trump the backing to do what he has to do.
Thank you. I want to give a quick shout out here to two supporters. Thank you, Anna Russell, for your super sticker. I wish the stickers came through into my software here, but they don't currently. Thank you very much for your support. And also a quick shout out to Elke and Andreessen. Thank you for the educated information. You're very welcome. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you're getting our free newsletter. You can find a link to that link to get the newsletter in our description. And please make sure you like this video and are subscribed to our channel. We do 3 political updates a week, plus this live show on Thursday. So I hope you're tuning in. Thank you very much. Okay, next question is going to be on, on Prime Minister Mark Carney in Canada. Thank you for your work. And this is from Anna. Can you comment on Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney? He is working for the British. Is he working for the British or WEF? And if so, how? Canada seems to be in trouble. Is all this a way of getting the U.S. and is getting to the U.S. and is Carney in collusion with China? One Canadian commenter said Trump may be working with Carney and his company, Brookfield, to make money and pointed to a deal announced with Brookfield on Tuesday. I support Trump and have seen his actions as being the benefit to the United States. So what is his connection to Brookfield and Carney? Don't know anything about this Brookfield company. I am praying for Canada. I followed the ostrich farm crisis in British Columbia around the mRNA bird-type flu vaccine and the Canadian Flood Inspection Agencies. Their government looks increasingly dystopian. Thank you, Anna, for the comment. So do you guys know anything about this connection to Carney's company, Brookfield, and Trump's connection to that?
Brookfield, I think, is in, a lot of these deals that came through. I can't remember which one Brookfield is actually involved in. I think it was part of the deals with either South Korea or Japan. And that is the company that Mark Carney was involved with shortly before he came out of, government retirement, so to speak, and began to run as a candidate for the Liberal Party in Canada. He is a major figure in the British Empire. He was basically the head of two central banks, the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. His policies are absolutely atrocious. He is, the guy who actually did the whole idea that we should have digital currencies and we should basically take away from any politician the ability to spend money for any government and put it into the hands of a bunch of expert bankers. In other words, a banker's dictatorship over the entire world. He made that speech in 2015 at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is where the US Fed conference actually takes place. So he's really trying to troll Trump. He declared that his entire idea of running for office and everything else in Canada was to prevent Trump from taking over Canada, allegedly. And, his entire reason for existence right now in various speeches is, how do I actually stop Trump's influence in the world? So he's trolling Trump all over the place. I think he is very, very far over his skis, and he doesn't have the slightest ability to actually change the momentum which Trump has created. But that's sort of the summary of where the guy is actually at.
Thank you, Barbara. Bruce, any comments? Okay. You're muted right now, but it's okay.
No, I don't have any comments.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the next question. In recent interviews, John Kiriakow's name is mentioned a lot. Is he a trustworthy source? He says Obama was a puppet, who, aside from the usual suspects, Singham, Soros, the monarchy globalists, who are the puppet masters and how many puppets are involved? Also, what will the alliance landscape look like a post-globalist monarchy divorce? Looks like a lot of movement around the world. Japan, China, Russia, Qatar, Argentina, Korea, and all others seem to be in play. Who will the globalists ally with once the dust settles? Surely they have a plan B. And with the newly elected Milei in place in Argentina, will the new government in Argentina survive? And this is the most important part of the question, I think. Or are we setting ourselves up for a proxy war with China and Russia over the control of South America? Thank you very much, Keith, for your prescient question. Barbara already started to touch with this on our Wednesday show. So yes, what's going on with, there was a huge $35 billion currency swap or so, I think, with Argentina. So what's going on with that? Trump's now renewing his focus on Central and South America, North America. Is there a proxy war with Russia and China over control of South America? Who are they going to side with?
Well, I think the president has made it very clear that the very first target that he's got to actually take on is the drug trade. And there is no question but that the countries which he's taking on, namely Venezuela, Colombia, and others, are nothing but narco states at this point. And, China, a lot of these countries are signatories to China's Belt and Road. And that's really left a lot of them in a lot of debt. So, no, I don't think we're setting ourselves up for a proxy war. I think what we're doing is, looking at the damage which has been done by the Obama administration and by the Biden administration, where what should be, from a security standpoint, our best economic trading partners, essentially for reasons of the fact that they wanted to have fundamental infrastructure, which China offered them. A lot of these countries are playing with the Chinese to an extent which is truly kind of alarming when you look at it. So I think Trump is opening up for the first time these relationships. He's working with Mexico on actually destroying the drug cartels in Mexico. the countries in Latin America are much more tied to the drug cartels. And before we can talk about, deals for real development, you need to clean out the corruption which comes from the drug trade. So I think it's a big issue. I think it's very important. These are people who used to be our best allies in terms of who do we actually sell goods to, for purposes of developing the entire economy. And I think what's going on is that we're prepared to offer these countries a much, much better deal than the Chinese are going to offer them. And that's really the question which is before us in terms of Trump and Latin America.
Yeah, Trump is very focused on hemispheric defense, and this has been crucial for U.S. sovereignty. That's why we had the Monroe Doctrine. And, Trump, even before he came into office, was talking about Greenland and Panama. And what's very essential is that he succeed in shoring up a hemispheric alliance that's working with the United States. Now, as Barbara points out, there's a lot of difficulties there. The drug trade is one. There are other economic issues. And but again, I think that what the twists and turns are is going to be very delicate here. And Trump's going to have to navigate a whole jungle to make sure that he can secure a hemispheric relationship in the tradition of the Monroe Doctrine.
Thank you very much, Bruce and Barbara. Okay, next question is going to be just trying to get a more general, a clearer understanding of what we mean by the institutional network of British imperial control. I think this is a historical issue that you're going to have to spend the time to really see and develop the historical thread. But I want to take this question because I think this resonates in the minds of all of our supporters. My request, if you please, is for a more detailed explanation and definition of the institutional network of British imperial control. I think the first thing you really have to get in your head is this is not some new thing. This is a historical thread that has been developing for at minimum hundreds of years. Okay, explanation, definition of the institutional network of British imperial control, so often referenced in your commentary. It seems essential that we understand precisely who and what constitutes this control, as such knowledge could empower us to challenge these networks through public awareness, outcry, or even targeted boycotts. Ultimately, there are human faces behind these institutions, so I say, let the unmasking begin. Thank you, Scott, for your thoughtful insight and for your question. So Barbara and Bruce, your thoughts on the institutional networks of British control. I think we already give a lot and we already unmask a lot, but Bruce and Barbara, your thoughts?
Well, there are two elements here, and I'll emphasize one, which is not really thought about or talked about by other people, which is, when the Round Table formed itself, and what they basically said is that we're the third iteration of the British Empire. They formed themselves around British universities, namely Cambridge, Oxford, and the University of London, the London School of Economics. And their idea was this is what they call soft power. What kind of way of teaching people how to think do we propose to do? And their entire philosophical premise has been that human beings are no better than animals, that basically we are not in any way associated with the creative force of God or obligated while on this earth to forward God's creation. It's two completely different worldviews of what human beings are. And they set out to corrupt every educational feature of the United States to make that the reigning philosophical view of what men and women are. That's point one, soft power institutions through the universities. And most people balk at that because they tend to think that all the secret gatherings of things like the Bilderberg Society or the Trilateral Commission or, the Mount Pelerin Society are where it's at. Those consensus institutions are important, but this whole idea of how do you think is what they call cognitive warfare. The second aspect of it is, of course, central banking, and that includes the Federal Reserve, that includes most of Wall Street, and that includes the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada, and the institutions which are associated with that, like BIS and the International Monetary Fund. So that's how I'd start. But the real challenge here is to think about what if these people who we can identify in these networks, how do they think of human beings and what type of ideology are they trying to sell? And, very, very critical stuff comes out of the Mount Pelerin Society, for example, which really, featured libertarianism coming into the United States, as a targeted strategy against the American system. There are other things which I could say, but I'll let Bruce follow up.
You muted, Bruce. I'm going to try to unmute you. No, I can't. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. I muted myself to mute my coughing. I'm sorry. I think, Barbara, you hit the right point. And I think the only way to really grasp this is to look at it historically. And this requires a lot of thinking. I referenced it earlier in terms of the history of the United States from 1763 on, basically, as a spear point of mankind's fight to free itself once and for all from the imperial system. The British Empire is not the first empire in the world. The British Empire draws its lineage continuously all the way back through the Venetian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Babylonian Empire, Persian Empire, and so on and so forth. It's a structure of sin, as Pope John Paul II would have called it. And man has struggled against this for thousands of years. And the United States became the first constitutional republic, the first nation state that was organized around a different idea. Not that that idea was new, but the constitution of a nation committed to that was new. And we've survived because we've maintained that fight against the British Empire. So to put the names and places on these things, you really have to do it from the standpoint of history. And I would refer people to the books that Bob Ingram has written, Graham Lowry, Will Wirtz has a book out, which are all available on the connections, I guess, through the Promethean Action website. So you actually learn about American history. And I hope that as we enter the 2026, which is the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States and the Declaration of Independence, that this subject of real American history be studied and understood by a broad swath of our citizenry. I'm quite happy that President Trump has decided to make this a real focus. And we at Promethean Action are going to do our part to bring out this element of our history, which used to be well known, but in the post-World War II period has been obscured basically by the institutions that Barbara talked about.
Thank you. Okay, the next few questions here are going to be on Mark Carney. Actually, so let me just pull up this first one. This first one's in the chat from Christiana. Will Canada's uranium provide leverage for Mark Carney over President Trump? Westinghouse is 51% owned by Brookfield and 49% owned by Cameco, which mines a lot of uranium in Canada. But I'm gonna group it up with this next one. It really seems like Mark Carney and Keir Starmer are completely disconnected from their respective populaces on all the exact same issues? Is Mark Carney and the Canadian elites a puppet of Keir Starmer and the British Empire? Or are they one and the same, just on different sides of the proverbial ponds? Is Wexit a political strategy being used by the Western? Yeah, so Wexit is the Western provinces of Canada exit. Canada's Western provinces to combat the Ottawa and Liberal left? Or have the Western provinces had enough of Ottawa's liberal ideology being shoved down their throats, and they now generally want to leave the Canadian Confederation? If Wexit is real and not political theater, would it make political and economic sense for these provinces and the U.S. if provinces applied for U.S. statehood? Okay. Would the Democratic Party allow these provinces to become states? Okay, I appreciate all that you and the Promethean staff are doing. Thank you very much for your support and for your question, Theo. So again, general questions. We have this Canadian, Mark Carney, Brookfield, and uranium. And then we just have this greater question on, you have liberal states in Canada that want to break away. I know it's hard to discuss because we're not Canadians, and it's hard for us to have real insight, or without a lot of study, it's hard for us to say. But any thoughts on this issue of the connection between Canada and Keir Starmer, or Mark Carney and uranium in Canada?
Yeah, I don't, with respect to Mark Carney and Keir Starmer, the answer is one and the same, just on opposite sides of the pond. With regard to secession and a civil war in Canada, this kind of dynamic is happening all over the so-called advanced sector, where the people are on one side and the governments are, number one, hate them, and number two, are on the other side of every single issue. And that's not something that can be sustained over time. So I don't know what would happen in terms of various Western Canadian provinces seceding from Canada and wanting to become part of the United States. My sense of it from reading things is that movement is more aspirational than actually reaching kind of a fulcrum point at this point in Canada. And Trump was very serious because he's looking at potential developments from the standpoint of defense of the Western Hemisphere, and also in terms of mega projects which could come to fruition were Canada under a different form of rule, which is why he said, why don't you join the United States in toto? And that, of course, sent the Carneys and others of the establishment into hysterics. So I think that's kind of just outlines what the various things are reacting here. I don't know enough about Brookfield, as I said before. I know that, except that I know that it's Carney's former major company, and it's an asset manager, which is how central banking has evolved in the world at this point. So that's how I'd answer your question. Obviously, we have to basically get the midterms solved here, make sure that there isn't going to be complete chaos in the United States, and then we'll be much better prognosticators on what's happening in other countries.
Yeah, Canada has historically been a staging ground for British operations against the United States. For that reason, if you know your history, Benjamin Franklin was deployed by the Continental Congress to lead a delegation to Canada, ask them to join the Declaration of Independence. The mission failed, and the British have used Canada as a staging grounds. The conspiracy to assassinate Lincoln was organized out of Canada. There's all kinds of things. And, I would say one of the telltale signs is the Canadian policy towards euthanasia, which has now become massive. And that's been, way to filter into the United States. So there's a lot of reason for the United States to worry about how the British use Canada as an operation against us. I think Trump is very clear about that, which is why he has not been bashful about taking on Canada and not considering it our greatest ally and neighbor, but something to be wary of. Although the people of Canada are quite good, and they obviously would like to have a better relations with the United States. So I think ultimately, as Barbara said, if we can solve some of these problems internationally, and especially the U.S. economy, the relations between the United States and Canada could proceed quite well. As to the uranium question, well, we have a lot of uranium in the United States, which has been locked up since the 1980s because of environmentalism. And we need to revive the uranium industry in the United States. And then we would be less dependent on this Canadian operation.
Thank you, Bruce and Barbara. All right, the next questions are going to be on the empire's next moves. First from David. First of all, I love you guys. I watch and remain so impressed at everything you share. So thank you, David. Thank you very much for your support. My question is, what would you predict is the Imperial London Canada's sabotage plan next steps? Based on your deep wisdom, how do you see that playing out? False flag, military, cyber weapons, domestic, something behind the scenes? It doesn't seem like they have many more moves left. Thanks. So thank you, David. And then this next question is very related. Why do you think President Barack Obama went to the UK last week? What did he accomplish his goal of sabotaging President Trump? So thank you, Carol, and thank you, David. What do you, in your minds, what is the empire's next steps here? Because I agree, it doesn't seem like they have many more creative moves left, for sure.
I don't know what they're going to do. All I know is that it will probably end up being suicidal and very destructive, which is what they actually do all the time. I prefer to focus on what we can do next as opposed to what they might do. I prefer to focus on offense in this respect rather than defense. Look, we've got a big job to do ahead of the midterms here in the United States. What we find on the ground is that the local Republican parties and many of the Republican politicians really have no idea of what Donald Trump is up to. And that's why we focus so much on actually teasing out the actual policies which he's putting forward, because otherwise they're completely blacked out and not available to the population. So right now, we tend to look at things from the standpoint not of imagining what else these satanic people might sink to, but creating a force beyond all recognition to actually defeat them. It's like the 2024 midterms. You could say that we haven't solved in any way the ability of these guys to commit vote fraud. But the simple answer to that was make the vote too big to rig. And that's exactly what we did by going on offense. And so that's where I think we have to work right now. And I think if we do that, anything they do is going to be neutralized, since their moves are very, very out there in the open. And, I don't think they've got a lot of new things to do.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to give, thank you, Bruce. Quick shout out here to Bill Vickers. First up, Bill, thank you very much for joining us every week and supporting our show. We really couldn't do any of this without you guys. And I think everyone already knows the answer. Name one Prime Minister of Canada who is in possession of 3 passports, bonus points for the countries. Okay, so that would be Carney. And the chat is telling me that the 3 countries are England, Ireland, and Canada. That's very interesting. He's definitely the international jet setter, Mark Carney. Okay, next question. Here we go. This one's going to be on middlemen. Okay. Love your show. Thank you, Gary. Your paragraph titled Beyond Trade Wars cuts to the heart of everything. The middle is where all the problems start. We wouldn't have trade issues if people at the top didn't worm their way to the middle. That's where all the corruption is. The whole reason for money was so that we could satisfy the middleman. Could you go into a little bit more depth on the middleman? It has been said, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Everything goes through the middle. Love you too. You do great work. And thank you very much, Gary, for the question and for being a part of our free newsletter. So the financial parasite that sits in the middle, Barbara and Bruce, comment.
Well, I'm not sure I actually know what is being talked about here. Obviously, money as a form of exchange is the middleman in many respects. In other words, you got the producer over here who wants to sell to the consumer over here, and how do they actually commit that transaction in a way which helps both to achieve their purpose. And right now, you've got all sorts of things in the middle of just about everything from the standpoint of financialization of the means of exchange. Healthcare, you basically go through 8 or 9 or 10 middlemen. At each point, the cost goes higher and higher and higher. So the answer is, overcome basically the entire British way of doing these things, the imperial way of doing these things. You could almost put it down to the simple thing: do away with usury and actually come up with a means of exchange which allows both the producer and the consumer to prosper. So that's basically how I'd answer the question. But you have to add to it, how does the middleman think about human beings? What does he or she think the role of human beings are in this world? And if you ask that fundamental question, you get to the heart of many, many things that have been set up based on the idea that these things are both A, amoral, and B, not very much in favor of God's creation. So that may be I don't quite know exactly what you're driving at, so I'm just guessing a little bit here, but I think that answers the question in one way.
Well, I think this is I think what you're getting at here, if I can guess at it, it would be what LaRouche talked about, the difference between a credit and a debt system, which really is the difference between the British and the American system. The American system is a credit system. The very word credit means believe. It's based on the future. That is, you're investing existing capability, whether you measure that in money or whether you measure that in physical terms, to produce a greater result in the future, such as investing in manufacturing or in a productive capacity or something like that. A debt system chains you to the past, where you are providing money for the purpose of closing a gap, a short-term gap, and then that creates a slave-master relationship between the people who are the debtors and the people who are extending the debt. And that is the old British imperial system. It's the Venetian system. It's the Babylonian tax farming system. You can go throughout history and see how all these societies, which were based on debt, failed. And we, especially since the end of World War II, have adapted to an increasing debt system. And that's why we have so much debt in our economy. And I think what Trump is doing and what we're trying to do here is shift from a debt system to a credit system in which investments are being made that will realize greater product in the future. And when I talk about product, I mean both physical product as well as human product. It increases in the productive powers of labor, which involves education, health, and all kinds of things. So that's a very short and simple way of saying it. But if you want to actually get to the meat of it, it's the difference between a credit and a debt system. And I think that's a better way to look at it than a term like middleman, if that's what you're trying to get at.
Probably also the financialization of everything.
Yeah.
So you have a whole bunch of these financial processes that sit between you and the desired outcome. And you have all these processes that sit in the middle that are just there to financialize and extract every single cent of monetary value out of a process.
A simple example of that is look at the ability to sustain a family. When we were a productive economy back in the World War II, post-World War II period in the United States, a single wage earner could support a family and afford a car, afford a house, be able to pay for all these things. As we looted the productive capability of the economy, the ability to sustain the standard of living for the population decreased. And we made up for it by extending debt to people. In the 50s and 60s, you didn't have a debt. You might have had at best a mortgage and a 2-year note on your car. Today, everybody has debt on everything. And now with this, buy now, pay later things, people are going into debt to buy a pizza. I mean, it's just financialization on everything.
Yeah, that was a meme for sure. Yeah, paying for your DoorDash bill with paying for installments, right? Your DoorDash bill. Okay.
Right.
Okay, next question is, again, this is a domestic issue. Everyone's talking about this. We have to address it. This election on Tuesday, it's so important, especially the government spots in New Jersey and the mayor spot in New York City. What are your thoughts on the communist Democrat Zoran running in New York City? Can New Yorkers actually be so dumb to vote for this guy? The very thought of this is happening is scary. Thank you, Evelyn, for your question and comment. Bruce and Barbara.
Well, you got two phenomena going on. You have Zoran in New York City, and you have the very, very, very tight governor's race in New Jersey. Now, Zoran, I think you got to step back and recognize what's going on in New York, which makes possible this guy Zoran's candidacy. Bob Ingram wrote a piece about that, which is posted on Promethean Action's website. I don't quite remember the title right now, but he points out that it is impossible for people in New York who are middle class and working class people to make ends meet at this point based on all of the costs which hit them directly. So when someone comes along who says, I'm going to make things free and I'm going to address the fact that the cost of living is so horrendous for people, that's what Mamdani's vote is. And people are literally so desperate, they don't give a damn about the ideology. They just want some form of relief. If he's elected, will it fail instantaneously? I think there will be complete chaos if he's elected. He has no good relationships with the NYPD, with the New York Fire Department, with all the traditional, and with many of the unions, which actually make up the bulk of the political establishment in New York City. So it's not that they're dumb, it's that they're desperate. And that basically creates a mess. You've got to basically be able to figure out a way, if you're a competent official, to ensure that exactly the people who voted for Mamdani out of economic desperation have a sign of hope in front of them, and they just don't see it. So we'll have to see how that pans out. Andrew Cuomo is hardly the shining knight in armor to come forward and actually change these things. It's a very nasty situation. So that's really how I see it at this point. Things may change. It's a very dynamic situation. And I think the New Jersey gubernatorial race is really quite interesting because there's a real chance that the Republican, Chiarelli, is going to win that because people are so repelled by the policies of the Democratic Party and that particular candidate.
I don't have
Thank
anything to add. I don't have anything to add to that, except that there's also a governor's race in Virginia, which has gotten a lot of controversy because of the statements from the Democratic candidate for Attorney General, Jay Jones, which was caught texting people about wanting to assassinate other politicians, and that's basically killed his campaign. Hopefully, it'll bring down the governor, Democratic candidate for governor, Spanbarger. Winsome Sears, who's the Republican candidate, is gaining on her, and we hope that we can defeat the Democrats here in Virginia.
Thank you, Bruce and Barbara. I just want to say something here because I know the internet and YouTube very well. We are not moon landing deniers. The United States did absolutely land on the moon. I'm well versed in all types of internet insanity, so I just wanted to say that I'm not like looking down on anyone, but I just have to say the United States definitely landed on the moon. Okay, so I want to move on to this next one here. Somebody's asking us for a little bit more guidance on something else, which is the American system. Okay, you often speak about the City of London and the British system's threat. Could you please spend some time on the American system beyond respect for sovereignty? You hold out as a preferred approach. Okay, I don't get don't treat human beings as cogs or beasts, but I think we newbies could use a bit more of what's good, right, and the things that we want, not just how bad the other folks are. Thank you very much, Arch, for your insightful question here. So I'm sure Bruce and Barbara are going to have a lot to say about this one here.
Well, I'll start. I'm not sure, Adam, whether you posted Bob Ingram's latest article or not yet. But, the point is that we have to, I agree with Arch. We've got to make it very clear to people what the American system actually is in action. And, if it's not posted yet, Bob Ingram just wrote a whole piece about the Erie Canal, which is something that I think actually speaks to American system methods. When the Erie Canal was conceived, there was nobody who actually had the means to construct it. It was a massive construction project. And what a bunch of people did is, over the course of some years, they went out and they figured out how to finance it, and they invented things all along the way to actually make it possible to construct it. Starting out with having no idea whether their idea for doing it would bear fruit and whether they could overcome the challenge in terms of putting together both the money and the labor to produce something which had never been done before in human history, i.e. the very, very long Erie Canal. And it was a major growth, project in terms of both the patriots who were behind it, but also a very good illustration of what the American system is really all about. It's about doing what seems to be impossible and funding what seems to be impossible, just like we now are talking about going to Mars and doing that kind of journey. Why would we do that? It's precisely because you actually will discover all along the way things which will improve overall the human race for total progress for everybody. So that's how I would do a kind of background piece, and Bruce probably will have a more concise way of saying it, but I just thought that was a very good exemplar of what the American system is all about.
Yeah, it is. the real sort of nub of the matter, as far as I'm concerned, is really understanding something, a basic principle of economics, which most people don't understand anymore, which is, where is the source of economic wealth? How is value created? And we've been brainwashed, both on the left and the right here, but also this is the essence of the British system, that somehow economic value is money, how much money you create. We all know that's not true. Where's the source of real economic value that improves the conditions of life for human beings, that increases man's power in and over the universe, that allows us to be able to increase the life expectancy from 20, 30 years to 80, 90, 100 years, to enable us to be able to develop the capabilities where we can create great art, great literature, and great increases in physical capability. This all comes from the creative powers of the mind. Now, the rub is that human beings are creative, and that's the source of all wealth, but creativity cannot be compelled. You can't order someone to become creative. You can't demand that someone, all of a sudden produce new scientific discoveries. The Soviets tried to do that. They had this idea of gulag science, where when they needed a scientific breakthrough, they would bring the scientists into the laboratory, but the scientists, because they were creative, would become dissidents to this authoritarian system, and so they'd have to send them back to the gulag. Now, the American system has a completely different approach. The example of the Erie Canal is a very good one. The colonies had to get over the Appalachians. They had to get out of this being stuck up against the seaboard, where they were sitting ducks for control by the British. And the British were always trying to keep the colonies from getting into the what we today call the Midwest. And so one way to do it was to create a canal that would enable freight and colonization to go not just to Western New York, but all through Ohio and Michigan and so forth, territory which had previously controlled by the French and then later the British. This was a project which had never been done before. There were canals in Europe, but they weren't of this magnitude. And as Barbara said, but you didn't know how to do it. You had to mobilize the intellectual capabilities of the population and to be able to make it happen. And we did that not by compulsion, but by inspiration. And so you organize your economy and you organize your society for the purpose of inspiring people to be able to use their creative powers to transform the world. This was done a lot in the, Barbara brought up the Moon Project and the Apollo Project, where Kennedy inspired the country to go to the moon in the decade and return a man safely to Earth when we didn't know how to do it. And ordinary people who had no technical training were recruited by NASA and trained and developed and created new technologies and new forms of doing things that had never been done before. They didn't learn it in school. They developed it because they were inspired to accomplish a mission. And I think that's the essence of the American system. And that's what Trump is bringing back. And I feel
Thank you very much, Bruce and Barbara. So I really want to focus on, because I know this is it's such a poisonous issue. We have somebody by the name of Charming Anarchist who says, moon landing, going to Mars, keep the jokes coming. This is at the center of what's killing the United States from the inside. There is this pervasive pessimism and demoralization about the power and capabilities of human beings. So we have this other, this is being reflected generally in the YouTube chat. X is a little bit different. Going to Mars is another lie. No, we are going to go to Mars. We are going to put human presence on another planet, not just the moon. Okay, so people just believe anything they read on the internet. Here's another one. So he went to the moon but lost all telemetry. I have no idea what you're talking about. Lost all telemetry and can't go back? Actually, humanity has been back to the moon a few times. wherever you're getting this, wherever people are getting this information, they really need some more mental hygiene. This is the kind of stuff that's, how do you propel a rocket into vacuum space? Well, you know, these are questions that people need to begin to educate themselves on. It's not very hard at all to understand, but this isn't the place to go through that kind of stuff. So this is really important. And the reason why this pertains, right? Don't treat human beings as cogs or beasts, right? The idea that human beings are just stuck on this planet Earth, that we have to just pay homage to, we do nothing but pay homage to Mother Earth. That's it. We're just stuck on this planet with limited resources. No, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case. And we have some much better comments, obviously, coming from our X people, which this support on X is generally better on this stuff. Fund the Space Force to mine gold from that asteroid and lose the fiat, right? The size of space is unfathomably large. The amount of stuff that's out there for human beings to use, right? Even just the idea, right? There's this crazy idea of building a sphere, like being able to capture all of the sun's radiative energy, right? That these kinds of ideas are only possible when you recognize human beings are not just animals. We have a certain other power of mind. Thank you, Paul. Yes. The best part of our audience understands what I'm saying. We have a lot of people now that are just so sucked into this YouTube soap opera. It's terrible. All right, so we've hit about 2 hours taking questions. Any final closing comments from Barbara or Bruce? Because I've said what I wanted to say. This whole flat Earth, no moon landing stuff really gets to me sometimes. Barbara and Bruce.
Well, I think just one thing about that, Adam, is that a lot of this will dissipate as we rebuild the physical economy and people start getting employment in manufacturing and real physical productive jobs. And because when you're working in actually doing something physical and changing the world, it causes your mind to learn the laws of science and physics, and you don't get disoriented by, you know, whatever somebody types into a computer. So I think you're absolutely right that this is a problem, and I think that it will dissipate. People didn't think this way back in the 50s and 60s because most people actually had to do something productive for a living.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of what's going on in a lot of this stuff is that there's a lack of productive identity, actually creating something new that benefits mankind, which used to be, if you think about like what my dad always told me his purpose on Earth was, is to make sure that the next generation actually has a better life. How do you actually create that for your children? Well, that means you've got to study a lot and you've got to break open some ideas about what are human beings anyway, and how do we create an economy which benefits everybody. So I think if you think about it, you know, what was the actual thing which attacked the United States? It was really deliberate cultural pessimism, down to the idea that we shouldn't have children, or the crazy climate stuff, which Bill Gates has just begun renouncing. All of that is a no future perspective. And if you really think about it, everything Trump is doing is on a very different plane than all of that. He wants to have a mission of the people in this country to actually create a bountiful, productive future for everybody. So that's how I'd close my remarks. Let's cut all the pessimism out and begin thinking about, you know, how do we actually serve mankind in the entire universe.
Thank you. Okay, quick shout out. Thank you, The New Life. Thank you for your support. I hope you're subscribed to our channel and you get our political update. One final closing question, super chat. And can you guys answer this? Give a one-sentence explanation. Can you elaborate on the difference between credit and debt? Surely if you are given credit, then you have a debt. So one sentence, what would you say is the difference between going into debt versus credit?
The difference between the future and the past. Credit is oriented towards the future. You're investing your current capabilities to produce something new in the future. Debt is change you to the past.
Thank you. And I just want to give last thing here before you go. Bill Vickers, actually, just so that you know, I've taken a lot. My blood pressure now is amazing. Okay, so I used to have blood pressure problems. I'm good now. So thank you again very much, Bill. Thank you everyone for your support. Please, if you haven't yet already, like this video, subscribe to our channel. We do 3 political updates a week, plus this live show. They go to Rumble, they go to YouTube, but they're also posted on x.com. And we hope to see you again next week. So thank you very much, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you.